Welcome to Coaching in Session,
where limits end and growth begins.
Hosted by Michael Rearden.
This is your space to challenge the ordinary,
unlock your potential,
and step boldly into your next chapter.
Your mindset journey continues.
Welcome, Susan Jane, to Coaching in Session. How are you doing today?
I'm really good. Really excited to be here. Thank you, Michael.
Well, I'm excited to have you on. We're going to be talking about your work. You are an intuitive coach, and we are going to be learning about all of what that means in just a minute. Now, just when we start to look at intuition as the precursor for our whole conversation, and even before the introduction, people will say they have great intuition. And rightfully so, right? It's kept you alive to this point.
Absolutely.
But what if I said that your intuition is not fully maximized yet? So think of it this way. You have a car that you're just driving with, one tire, right? Yeah, you might get somewhere. But what if you had all four tires going for you, right? So we're going to be learning about how we can fully maximize ourselves. And the way we're going to do it is by learning a little bit more about ourselves, if there are any gaps or any things or insecurities that we have to address. So Susan, if you could, can you tell us who you are, what you do, and of course, how you help people?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that lovely introduction too, Michael. So I'm an intuitive coach, or I actually call myself an intuitive psychic as well, because I draw on all of my abilities, and that's what our life is all about. It's all those understandings, all those ups and downs. It's all about drawing on our abilities and what we've learnt through them. And that's where trusting your intuition comes in and getting an understanding of that. So I incorporate life coaching, I incorporate psychic readings, I incorporate digital marketing too. So I incorporate all of that. I love working with women that are starting their own business. So when you were talking earlier, Michael, about those transitional periods where we're going from middle school to the higher school or to college, you're talking about those transitional periods. I work a lot with women that are in that transitional period where they're moving from maybe empty nest syndrome, don't know what to do with their life, or they're starting a little side hustle and want to go forward with that. So in what I do is I help them bridge that gap between that. But I really like helping them learn to trust their intuition. And trusting your intuition is all about seeing those signs and symbols, those feelings that we have. We receive our intuitive messages physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So we receive them in 4 different ways. I've got a little quiz on the website that you can see how you receive your intuitive messages. But when you understand that, you start to take more time in getting an understanding of what that means to you. You learn to reflect on it. So say you are transitioning from schools, or you're transitioning from divorce, you're transitioning from a marriage to a divorce, you're transitioning in these different ways. It's actually going within and connecting with our intuition to understand why we're feeling the way we're feeling. And sure, we can put it out there and go, oh, well, I'm just going through a divorce. What the? So, but when we start to break it right down, well, what does that mean to you? Why? Why are you feeling that way? And another person feels a completely different way about divorce. So it's getting an understanding of our feelings, our emotions, our reactions physically, and even our spiritual connections on that. And I don't know whether I explained what I do properly. That's the beginning of it.
Well, the beauty of our conversation today is we're really going to be learning about how you help people and what you do. So it doesn't have to be all done in one bio. It doesn't have to be done in just one spill. It could be done as we progress in our conversation today. And as I was saying before we even hit record, about the different levels of how people progress in life, whether it be from elementary to middle school to high school, we are always in that that transition. And even as we are aging, right, we're in our 30s, going to our 40s and our 50s, and at some point, I don't know what age it is, but like you're considered elderly, maybe 65 or whenever they give you Medicare or Medicaid in America. So it's like, okay, you are now an elderly person. You're like, well, I don't feel elderly. And maybe there's some people who are 40 who feel elderly, where they're like, my back hurts, my knees hurt, everything hurts. And I think of like, okay, well, if it's hurting, we have a couple of mindsets that can happen, right? Number one, this is going to be my whole entire life. I'm 40, and this is what 40-year-olds feel like. And then 2, it's like, I don't want to feel this way. How can I change? And I can't imagine how many people who want to change and they give themselves this idea of the benefits of changing, but they don't change. They stay stuck where they are. In your experiences, why do you think people choose to remain where they are versus maybe forwarding themselves to a better life or a better position?
I don't feel that they deliberately do it, but they do deliberately do it without realizing that they're doing it. I know in my change, and I'm going to talk about my experience in that context, because it was I had to change me in order to change my life. And one of the things is I needed to change was what I spoke, how I spoke. So it was like, oh, I'm having a bad day, I'm having a shitty day, or I'm, like you say, I'm 40 and I can't do this. It was very, very negative, very, very down, and not forward thinking and not positive. So I had to stop saying, oh, I'm sick and tired of seeing this, because I was getting sick and tired. I was attracting what I was putting out. So I had to start changing that. Money was one of the biggest issues I had. I'd never had money. But I always said, oh, no, I can't afford that. I can't afford that. And so in saying, I can't afford that, I can't afford that, I can't afford that, naturally, I couldn't afford that. So then I started saying, no, hang on, I've got $50 in my purse. I can afford it. I just choose not to spend it on that this time. And so it was a simple mindset, a simple change like that has allowed me to move forward in that context. And this is all about learning to, again, trust ourselves to go, okay, it's only a simple mindset. And if I say it right, and if I keep going that way, then it's going to change what I'm attracting. So the law of attraction. So every time you say, oh, I can't afford that, that's what you're attracting. Every time you say, I'm sick and tired of that, that's what you're attracting. Every time you say, I've had enough of that, I've had enough of that, that's what I'm attracting. So it's how we say things, how we do things that make it really, really important. And what will happen is, and this is where your intuition will kick in. So what was happening, I kept on saying, no, I can afford that. I choose not to spend it on that this time. I could no longer, intuitively, I could no longer say, I can't afford that. It just would not resonate with me. It's like, no, you choose not to spend it on that. And things completely change. So this is where you're starting to really, it's a simple first step on changing your life. And it's what you're attracting, what you're manifesting, what you're putting out there, the energy you're putting out there. You're receiving it back. And that's why you've got to change that. And that's where people don't realize. They start to talk about their life and they express everything that's going wrong, but don't express things that they could be going right. So they're constantly attracting that energy again and not being able to move. So yes, they're doing it intentionally, but they're not doing it intentionally.
Yeah. In mindset, there are multiple types of mindsets, but the common ones are going to be a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And this is the idea of you have someone who's looking at the positive and what's the potential versus someone who's thinking of their situation and what is allotted for them. Now, when we start to look at intuition, are there two sides to it, very similar to mindset, where there's a fixed intuition or a growth intuition? And if so, how would someone start to lean more toward the growth intuition side?
So the thing with intuition is it's because it's messages coming from your soul. You have to understand what the messages and the symbols and the signs are all about. Now, it's not something that you can just get a book and read about. It is because it's so individual for everybody. You need to get that understanding. So if you saw a ring on a sideboard, what does a ring mean to you? What does a ring mean to somebody else? Because a ring is everlasting. It's continuous. It's a circle. It could mean a relationship. It could mean a marriage. It could be that it's on the bench. It means it's a separation. So it's all these different areas, and that's where connecting with your intuition is getting the understanding of what those signs and symbols are. When you walk into a room and you know that someone's had an argument and you can feel that energy, that's sort of, straight away, someone's been arguing. You don't know what the argument is. You don't need to know, but you know that it's happened. And this is all part of your intuition. So everybody's got it, but it's more about, when you talked about the car, we could have an old bomb or we could have a Maserati. And that is, like you need money to do that, but with intuition, you need to be connected to your intuition and know those signs and symbols to get you stronger and better and more in tune with it. So that's really what it's all about, being in tune with it. And you'll meet people and you'll go, oh, I don't know, I've got a funny feeling about them. And don't brush that off. You've got a funny feeling about them. Just acknowledge, I've got a funny feeling about that. You don't have to judge that person. You don't have to say they're a good, bad, indifferent. All you have to do is say, I've got a funny feeling about that person, and keep yourself open to receiving more information about that.
Would you say that intuition is similar or has some similarities to reading someone's energy?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So when you're doing readings, when I'm doing the psychic readings, and I call them intuitive psychic readings because I actually connect with the person's energy. So I can see or feel or understand or get those messages that help me guide that person. So when I'm coaching, when I'm having a session with them, it's getting an understanding of what that person can tolerate. Because I could turn around and say to you, hey, Michael, all you have to do is this. And it could be so out of your league that you'd go, no, that's just woo-woo. I don't want to do that. So when I connect with that person that's sitting in front of me or on the screen in front of me, I can get the understanding of what they can take on board and what they can't, and how far I can push them, take them out of their comfort zone and move them forward a little bit more, because that's what connecting with them is all about, making it suitable for them, making it individual. It's not just here, this is my coaching session, this is what you've got to do. It's getting an understanding of what's the best way for them. I was working with a lady yesterday, and I knew I really wanted to say to her, this relationship is no good for you. It's really bad for you. Stop it. But I knew she would not take it on board. And after she talked and talked and talked about this man for probably 15 minutes, she said to me, you know what, Susan, if you told me that I shouldn't be in this relationship, I should just leave, I would do that. And I just looked her straight in the eyes and I said, you need to leave this relationship. Because they'd already separated, but she just wanted him back. But it was not for the right reasons. It was because she was lonely, not because she wanted him, but she was lonely. So it's, I couldn't tell her that to start with. I had to wait until she was ready, and then bang, here's the information that you need. You've got to deal with it now.
I love coaching in session for many reasons. One of the reasons is that we get a wide breadth of coaches, personalities, and then processes of how someone does something. I like to simplify and call it sugar and spice. Whereas like you have a sugar method, it's like, oh, we can do it very sweet. Okay, when you're ready, let's figure it out. Then you have the spicy, we're doing it now, right? All right, do or die. Like think of David Goggins, right? He's like, we're going to do it no matter what, right? So there's different types of personalities. And I always tell people, what you are, like, how you're going to perceive things. So if you need something like, hey, sugar, cool. If you need the spice, it. So people don't shy away from like yourself. Like if you know yourself well enough, you say, I need this type of person. I need this type of coach. And it's so important. And this is why I love coaching in session, because we have so many wonderful coaches that come on just like yourself, Susan, and they're able to say like, this is how I am with my clients. And then people are like, wow, I can see that. Like, that's what I need in my life, because we live in such a harsh world today, right? Exactly. And that harshness can come from work. It can come from our partners. It can come from our family. And sometimes people need that retreat where they can come to somebody and say, okay, let's figure this out together, versus throw me in the fire and it feels like I'm back at work. Because sometimes, when you have a bunch of things that need to be that needs to get done, whether you want to start a business, you got to get an LLC, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to spend time with family. And before it becomes a to-do list, and they already have enough on their to-do list. So sometimes they just need a conversation. And then from that conversation, it can lead to gentle nudging.
Yeah, and I like to help them find their passion back again, especially when it's like a side hustle for a job for what their passion. And sometimes we get so caught up in all that, like you say, the to-do list. It's nice to get that passion back, and I'd sort of go, well, what about this? And that helps them move on. So, but I do give homework. Don't worry. I need that done by next time.
Yes, you do have to be assertive to some degree.
Yes, you
I
do.
think of intuition, right? Intuition. I compared it to energy early on with one of the questions, right? And I remember that sometimes my intuition wasn't exactly spot on. And I say this not because intuition is bad, it's because I wanted to bring some clarity to people who might be thinking that their intuition is one thing, but it might be a false read or something along those lines.
Yeah.
Where in school, sometimes I might say, oh, I don't like this person. I don't like their energy. But then 5-10 years down the road, it's just like we're best friends. It's just like what happened with that initial read of my intuition or that energy. It was like something fell off before, but then now it's like it has no option but to feel right. When it comes to that intuition, does intuition does intuition develop? Does it mature? Or do we just learn that maybe at one point our intuition might be saying something that is not true to us, even though we might know the truth deep down?
With it, I love this question. This is great. With your intuition in that context, so it is energy. So because that's how the messages come through, is energy. So when you're saying as a friend at school and you sort of go, I don't like that energy and everything else, that's fine, because that person needs to develop and you need to develop. And so consequently, at that age group or at that level, you're not at the same level. You're running different frequencies, energy frequencies. As you've got older, you go through different lessons and learnings, and you start to reflect back. So when you look back there and so then you become best friends with this person. When you look back at your childhood or you reflect back, it was just very different. Your intuition was correct then. It's correct now. But the energies now become more in line. So now you are seeing each other for the real reasons, or friends with each other because you have got those connections. So your intuition's always right. The problem becomes how we read the signs and symbols. So your intuition was right by saying, oh, I don't like that person, that I feel uncomfortable with that person. That person could be putting out some really weird vibes. They could have just had a fight with someone. They could have just, had all sorts of problems. So the energy they're putting out is not necessarily nice because they're going through some crap themselves. So you go, oh, I'm going to stay away from that person. I'm not liking the vibes happening there. And that's fine. That's listening to your intuition. You come back the next day, that person's dealt with that sort of stuff, and all of a sudden their energy is really bright and light, or they may have taken something to make them feel a bit brighter and lighter. So your intuition is never wrong per se. It is how you see those signs and symbols. One example I want to give, we were driving down the road. I was with my partner. We were driving down the road, big M1, the big freeway in Queensland. And we had been talking about something before we left. Anyway, we're driving along and he goes, oh my goodness, did you see the billboard? That is exactly what we were talking about. And I said, no, I didn't see that. And we just kept on going along. And then I went, oh my goodness, listen to the radio. They're talking about the same thing. And he goes, oh, I didn't hear it. Now, we're both in the same car, going along the same road. He sees the billboard. I didn't see it. I hear the radio. He didn't hear it. So it's how we take on those messages and what we do with that, because we can see those messages. We can see like angel numbers 1111. We can see that. But what does that mean to us? And that's where the interpretation is where we can get those intuitive messages mixed up. So it's when we go with the flow, when you're heading down the road and for some reason you head left instead of right, and then you think, why am I going down this road? Intuitively, you needed to go down that road. Don't know why, don't know how, but either something would have been happening on the other side, or you needed to see something going that way. So it's going with the flow and getting the understanding and not trying to control everything all the time.
Right.
Did I answer your question? Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to say this. In coaching a session, even though I ask questions, you can bypass the question and just answer it however you want. Because it's all about conversation here. It's not
Yeah,
about, oh, let me ask you 21 questions and it's so
yeah.
boring. Like I want to get to know you. I want to have a conversation. And I'm sure people who are listening, they want to get to know you as well. So
Oh,
this is an opportunity for everyone, even myself included, to get to know you, Susan.
yeah.
I think of maybe this can be funny to some level is like
Yeah.
there's a saying that opposites attract
Yep.
where using myself as an example, I'm very structured. I like things
Yep.
structured. Like
Yep.
I'm punctual. Everything is to a degree,
Analytical.
right?
Yeah.
And I just think of having the opposite, right? Like my opposite would be someone who's not punctual. They're just super everywhere. There's like pragmatic and it's like my brain will be like, what are you doing? Right. Now, my intuition might say that this person is not a good fit for me. Like, it's like, oh, like they're just totally different and like they're not on time. And like, I can look at all these little things, right? But then I can maybe give myself of, looking in the future of like, maybe they'll mellow out and they'll, calm down and they'll figure out like, maybe they'll acclimate to me where maybe I feel that like they have this ability to acclimate versus like they'll never change because some people are just super stubborn. They're like, yep, that person ain't changing.
Yeah.
But then there's some people is like, I feel as if this is a good fit. Now, in relationships, we can see that people, they have an intuition about someone, opposites could attract, and where they have this relationship. And sometimes they're able to grow and they're able to meet somewhere in the middle. But then sometimes it's just like a relationship that's always headbutting.
But yeah,
And when you have this intuition, maybe where you're at that headbutting phase, should you say, well, we're continuing to headbutt, very similar to how you were mentioning that maybe one day they have this bad energy because something happened in their situation, their life. Would the headbutting be something where we should say, okay, this is a deal breaker or a red flag? Let's walk away and find someone who we're more in line with right now. The energy is good versus, okay, let's figure out where this is going, even though it feels kind of good, but it feels kind of wrong.
well, I can't answer that. I do that individually. I wouldn't like to put that across as a general because everybody's very, very different. But what I would
Right.
say is the headbutting is definitely a sign to say work needs to be done.
Mm.
Okay. Why are you headbutting? Why are you being triggered? Why is that sort of thing happening? And that's where I would be sort of looking at and as far as the energy. So intuitively, you know that usually what happens, this is what usually happens, Michael. Intuitively, as you've come together in a relationship, whether you're opposites, whether you're the same, it doesn't matter. You've come together in a relationship. And usually for the first period of time, it's all good, it's all exciting, you're learning about each other and everything else. But as you're learning about each other, you will often hold back on things that may irritate you. So, for example, you're very analytic. You have a partner who keeps arriving late, and that would annoy me. I don't like being late, right? So that would annoy me. But when you first meet them, you go, oh, well, that's okay. There's a reason.
Mm-hmm.
As the relationship gets further and further down the track, the reasons become very, very thin. And then you start to go, hang on, it's disrespectful, right? Arriving late all the time. It's very disrespectful. And then you start to get the animosity towards it and you start going, no, you're not looking at it that way. Yes, I guess you're busy, but that's disrespectful if you're going to say you're going to be there and you're not there. So the whole situation starts to change. But the problem is, when you're first meeting someone, you need to be strong enough to say, hey, it upsets me a little bit when people arrive late. I find that's disrespectful. And if you can speak like that when you first start a relationship without creating problems, but just acknowledging your feelings, acknowledging that, hey, that feels uncomfortable. I don't know why. I'm not really sure, but it feels uncomfortable. The other aspect is you don't need them to change. You need them to understand how you feel. If they choose to change then you know that they're respectful of you. If they choose not to change and they still arrive late, then you know that they're not going to change. So in my first marriage, in my marriage, I did not speak up. And consequently, it got worse and worse and worse and worse. In my relationship now, we've been together for 14, 15 years now. My biggest goal was when I first met my partner, I needed to make sure I spoke my truth. And that's where your intuition will still come through too, because I needed to speak my truth. I needed to say, I'm just not sure whether I can do that yet. It doesn't feel right for me. I'm uncomfortable with that. So you don't have to give reasons. You don't have to give an excuse. You just need to say, flag it. There's something, it just feels off. I don't know why, but it feels off. Let me sit with that for a bit longer. Because if you don't put in, and I'm not talking about boundaries, or your partner does not know what you like or dislike until you tell that partner what you like or dislike, or until your partner sees by the look on your face, by everything else. But if you've been late for 20 years with your partner, and all of a sudden they turn around and go, I don't like it when you're late. Why didn't you tell me that 20 years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, your intuition's kicking in, but let it kick in early, because you will feel it when you first meet somebody. You will feel that. You'll go, that doesn't quite feel right. But you let it go because you're in love. So that's where you need to step in.
Yeah. I use relationships as the blanket, and sometimes I use fitness as the blanket, and it's just for everything, right? It could be for anything. Think of a relationship not just being with your partner, but maybe your career, where
Absolutely.
you have bosses, employees, all of these things, right?
Yeah.
And I can't, imagine like where a company would just hire people based on intuition. Typically, it's going to be some level of notoriety. They're going to look at achievements, results, things along those lines. Maybe intuition plays a role at some point. Like, I feel good about this person versus I'm getting a bad vibe about them. On a scale of importance, is tuition the priority when it could be career, relationships, where you're looking at something like this feels good, like this feels like it's going to work? Or should it be, let's look at the track records, let's look at their history, let's look at their achievements?
Okay, so what you're referring to is emotions and the physical track record. So intuition isn't just emotions. So with intuition, you will feel it, you will see it. Spiritually, you will know it. It just does not feel right. I know it doesn't feel right. I don't know why, but I know it doesn't. So when you're talking about the way you were saying that in making choices and things like that, if we're just going with our emotion, no, it's wrong. That's what happened to this lady yesterday. It was just all emotions. It was just all emotion. No, it's got to be a balance between the physical and the emotional. It's got to be a balance between the mental and the spiritual. We've got to have that balance. So when you're looking at, should I apply for a new job? Look at the pros and cons. That's one of the first things you do, because you've got to live this life. So if you're not mentally stable, if you're not emotionally secure, if you're not physically covered, you're not going to have a very good spiritual life. Because spirituality is trying to get you along the right path. It's trying to take you through your lessons and your learning so you can step up a grade, So if you don't have those other three areas intact, then, if you're just following your emotions all the time, for me, I'm a little bit like you, Michael. I like the analytics. It's got to make sense. It's got to make sense and spirit, in together. We're two. We've got a soul, we've got that spiritual aspect, but we've got that physical body. Now, you think about it, a soul or spirit doesn't have the 5 senses that we do as a physical body. They can't touch, taste, feel. They can feel. See, that they can't do that in the same way we do. So spirit has to come into our body to get a learning of what it actually feels like to have your cup of coffee in the morning. It's got to get into the body to get an understanding of all those emotions and all those, because spirit is the energy. They feel energy. They don't see pictures. They feel energy. So this is why it's really important to have that lovely balance between the physical, the spiritual, the emotional, and the mental. We have to have that balance. So when you're looking at going for a new job or changing jobs or partners or anything like that, connect with all. Physically, how does it feel? Oh, yeah, she's pretty hot. I'll go with that. Physically, it's fine. Emotionally, oh, yeah, she's a little bit up and down with the emotions. I'm not sure if she's emotionally intelligent enough because she might depend a bit more on me. Mentally, is she got the mental capacity that will keep you entertained or keep you happy? Does she know how to change a tire in the car? Is that important to you? These are the sort of things that you're looking at. And then spiritually, is she in tune with who she is? Is she aware of who she is and what she is? Does she have a bit of purpose in her life? And that's sort of how you're picking. And I don't know why I went she, but, that's where I went. That's why you need to get an understanding of all of it, even your job, because it's not about going into a new job. We can look at that with beautiful, big, bright eyes and go, oh, it's amazing, it's amazing. But there's a lot of other aspects to it that we need to go back and have a look and go, okay, pros and cons. Going into a new job, that's stressful. Even if it's a great job, good money, it's a stressful period changing over. So is my mental capacity ready for that? Is my emotional, if I'm going through a breakdown in my relationship, is a change of job a good idea at this particular stage? Am I loading myself up too much? So these are the sort of things that you need to look at. And a lot of those times it's sitting there, giving yourself that time and that space to get an understanding of what you need to do or where you can go. Or listening to the podcast, taking out what you need from that podcast. As you said, with a podcast, anything like that, a book. I used to read heaps of books. That was before podcasts were around. Used to read, but I would only take out what resonated with me. If somebody told me to stand on my head for 10 minutes a day, it did not resonate with me, not going to do it. Do the things that resonate with you, because if they feel good to you, or you sort of go, oh, it's out of my comfort zone, but I'm going to have a go, that's right.
Yeah. It's so powerful because I think of, Tony Robbins, he has this thing of like walking on coals. Like he used to do it a lot before the pandemic, where people would have to walk over a bed of coals in order to get into the seminar. Yeah. And you can just see so many people who were fighting with themselves. This is not a good idea. Yeah. I'm not going to walk over. I'm going to get burned. And he even did it himself, saying, look, I can do it. And then from there, people are like, okay, let me try, and then it's so funny because like the last person is probably like the most scared. It's like everyone's watching me now. Yeah. And I still have doubts about it. But the moment they do it, it's like relief. Like it just swells over them. They're just like, wow, this is so amazing. Yeah. And I think of just how we begin to mature, as we are, growing up or leveling up, or however you want to see it, where our intuition when we're younger versus our intuition when we're a lot older is very different. Think of a parent's intuition, right? Your parents can probably tell you all the friends that are no good versus us saying, oh yeah, they're a good guy. They let me play with their Legos and, like we laugh a lot and we play in the jungle gym together. Right. And it seems good, but your parents just have that, that wisdom intuition where they can say, okay, that, this person's no good for you and I'm going to adjust it, et cetera, et cetera. Now, when we say like intuition can mature with age, the environment that someone can be in also can mature. So you might say, okay, well, I'm not going to stay in the clubs anymore because I've learned that being in the clubs, I'm not going to find a person that's going to be, maybe in alignment with me, with what I was looking for, relationships, or maybe, for myself, like how I want to feel in the morning versus going out and partying and dancing. Yes, sure. In your 20s, it could be a lot of fun. But then maybe when you're in your 30s or 40s, you're starting to think maybe in a more practical way, thinking of family or thinking of children versus of going out and partying. And I wanted to ask you, like in your experience, is it better for people to go out and live life and experience the changes in intuition, or for them to learn about themselves before they make any mistakes or before they go out and maybe have like a negative situation happen in their life?
Good question. And I think that's, again, an individual aspect of it, because what is good for the goose is not necessarily good for the gander. So as a younger person, I partied. I loved it. As an older person, no, I didn't. And you sort of hit the nail on the head. It's the morning after. It's those other aspects. It's meeting a person because you're going into an environment that you're meeting that type of person. So I would be saying it depends on that level of where that person is. But don't expect to meet the love of your life in a space or a place that you don't like hanging out in, because that's not. One lady I had, and she sort of said, how am I going to meet my, perfect person? And I said, well, don't hang around in the places where you think they're going to be. Hang around in the places you want to be. Because if you're in the places you want to be, that means that person is in the place that they want to be as well. So you're more likely to get somebody that is a little bit more enjoyable. So if you were a truck driver, you wouldn't be hanging around hiking unless you liked hiking. And not many truck drivers like hiking. So it's like, if you like hiking, go hiking, because then you're going to meet somebody that's more likely liking hiking, or is just liking hiking, but more likely to be an outdoorsy person, more likely to be enjoying that sort of environment. So yes, the environment's really, really important to where you're going and what you're doing. If you're not going to the right environment to meet, especially if it's a relationship, even work, like if you wanted to change jobs, would you be going to a pub to find, or a bar or something to find the right person to change jobs with? Or would you be hanging out on LinkedIn, maybe going to some networking sessions? So the environment is really, really important. And if you want something strong enough, make sure you're in the right space for it. And make sure it's a space you want to be in as well. Because if you don't want to be there, your energy is going to really put forward that you don't want to be there.
Well, I must say there are many different levels of intuition, and I can't tell you how much I learned today. Just this idea of intuition might seem very surface level, but it goes so much more deeper. And I know when people are looking at intuition and now maybe what they have known and what they have learned from this episode, I can promise you that there's so much more for you to learn. And of course, Susan, if you could, can you please tell people how they can find you, reach out, and then also give us some final words where people can walk away with something where it's like, wow, that was deep and that was meaningful.
Okay, so you can get me on the website, intuitivenature.com.au, and it's Australian business. There's a little quiz on there that you can work out how you receive your strongest intuitive messages to get an understanding of that. There's quite a bit of learning in that too, but you got a free area in that side of it. But what I want to say, I actually want to not give you words of wisdom. I want to actually give you a little exercise that you can do to learn how to trust your intuition. So one of them is where you just stand up straight and you just relax into standing there, and it's a yes-no answer. Your body becomes like a pendulum. And you say, define yes for me. And you will find that you would either go forward or back. The majority of times the yes is forward. And then you'd say, okay, define no. And you'll find you just start to go backwards, right? It takes a little practice, but you'll get that. And then when you decide, should I be leaving my job? You will start to get this yes-no answer. Be in the right space, be in the right time. But this will give you an intuitive understanding of what your body is trying to tell you. Now, the biggest thing about this is what questions you ask, because you could ask, should I leave my job, and get a yes? But there could be a lot more other things to it. Do I need to get a new job first? Do I need to line up something else first? So asking the right question. One of the things was a lady said, am I going to have a baby boy? And she got a yes. And she had a baby girl. She goes, well, how did that happen? Her next pregnancy was a baby boy. Is this pregnancy a baby boy? And that's the question. So getting the right one. But do that. Start to trust your own body. Start to trust your own self is my strongest thing. And just be mindful that the messages and the images you get, or the messages you get, can be interpreted a little bit differently. So don't be afraid to be open about it.
All right, perfect. And I think that's a wonderful exercise for anyone to do. And I know if you do the exercise and you say, should I reach out to Susan? It's going to be a definite yes. You're going to be leaning forward all day long. And I want you to make sure you don't bump your head, all right? But if you do start leaning forward, make sure you lean down in the description box below. Click that link to her website, take the test, learn more about how Susan can help you become more intuitive in life. And I do want to thank you, Susan, for coming on, spending some time, and of course, talking about your work today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me and have a great day, guys.